Welcome to Career Tools. This week, I'm not a people person, Chapter 1. The questions this cast answers are, how do I become a people person? What do people do differently? And can I fake being a people person? The reason we thought about this cast, or the reason it came up, was because in 2018, so it's 2018 now if you're listening. No, it's 2019 now if you're listening. Apparently the year changed and nobody told me. So in 2018, the creator of Linux, the programming software, whose name is Linus Torvald, announced that he was taking a break from working in order to work on his people skills. He said he was going to get some assistance on how to understand people's emotions and respond appropriately. And like Steve Jobs, he was famous for his outbursts directed at individuals and groups working on Linux. And so we wondered, what could he have been learning on his break? We can take some educated guesses. But if you've ever been told or thought to yourself, like him, I'm not a people person or I don't have good people skills, this is the guidance for you. We are going to give you what we think he might have been learning, but definitely what will be useful to you if you don't feel like you're a people person or you've been told that you're not a people person.
Right. Maybe what he might have been learning, but also what we think you should maybe learn.
Exactly.
We're going to cover 6 things: behavioral remedies, introduce yourself, introduce other people, use salutations, use and, not but, and stop interrupting.
So we're going to start with behavioral remedies. So before we start, we want to make this clear that this guidance is not about changing your mindset or healing your childhood hurts. It's not therapy. We cannot give therapy to 2 million people over a podcast. It just doesn't work. So what we're going to talk about is behavior change, the things that you do or don't do that make people say things or draw conclusions like you're not a people person. Because to some extent, your motivation for doing something is irrelevant. So let's put it outside of you, the person listening, for a minute. So let's say your boss yells at a colleague of yours because there's a mistake in a spreadsheet that went out to a client. Now, we can agree that yelling in a workplace is not an ideal behavior. But does it matter that your boss is motivated by, avoiding humiliation that he had at school because he had dyslexia, or his wife is nagging him that the family should take a vacation and he doesn't think they can afford it, or a client yelled at him and he's just passing it on? Does any of that matter if what we want him to do is not yell? No. None of it matters. All we want you to do is stop yelling.
Yeah.
So motivation and therapy kind of gets to your motivations, and we don't need to get to your motivations. We just need to get to your behavior.
Right. What matters is that we regulate our behaviors, right? It doesn't matter either, by the way, why we change our behaviors. Again, motivation is less important than the behavior that we see. So we're not focused on why people are behaving the way that they are. We assume that they have a good reason for that. We're going to give them that level of trust. And what we're going to focus on is the change in behaviors. And so it doesn't matter why he changes. Maybe he's changed because he was threatened with a demotion, or someone could brave the dragon and be blunt with him and say it's unacceptable to yell in the office. Or honestly, he could just have a moment and decide for himself that he wants to change things. The reason your boss yells, the reason he changes, that's not our focus today. What we're going to talk about and discuss and figure out today is the next time something like this happens, we don't see someone yelling. Instead, we see more positive behaviors. Instead of the behavior of standing within 10 inches of the direct and raising his voice and not stopping when the direct tries to interrupt, maybe instead your boss leaves the room, right? That would be more positive. Maybe he goes outside and yells at a tree. Maybe he just chooses not to raise his voice. There's all kinds of things that you could do differently. And we're going to focus on behavior here because, again, we're going to assume that everybody means for it to go well, right? They have a positive intention. We're going to give them that trust. We're also not going to turn you into a people person. We're going to give you a list of behaviors that others see as things that people do. So we're going to make it appear as if you're a people person based on the behavior that you engage in. It's like a coping mechanism. It's what you do to prevent your non-people person nature from hurting you and others around you. Because behavior is a choice, right? And we just want to help everyone see the choices that people make and help everybody make those choices too. I think we've talked about this before, Wendy, you and I specifically. We talked about the idea of a friendly person, right? Someone says, oh, Maggie's friendly. And what they're really saying is Maggie's behavior indicates to me that she is friendly or that she enjoys people, something like that. And usually that proxy behavior, that the behavior that we see is like smiling at people, right? If someone smiles at you, either in the hallway or, somewhere, you say, oh, that person's probably friendly. And so what we're going to focus on here is that there are behaviors that you can engage in that will indicate to others, oh, this person is a people person.
Or at least not a non-people person, not a standoffish person, not a arrogant person. And some people might say this is disingenuous, like we're going to make you act differently to the way you feel. Acting differently to the way you feel is something you do all of the time. You don't go to the doctor's office and yell at the doctor because you're sick. You don't go to church and make a big ruckus. You don't go into a store and, just take the goods, even when there's a really long queue you don't want to stand in. You make different choices. You do different behavior from what you feel all the time. And all we're trying to do is get rid of the negative and the things that people will say to you, this is why you're not progressing. This is why you can't be on this project. This is why I'm not going to give you a promotion. And we're going to replace them with behaviors that will have a more positive effect.
For those of you who've listened to Manager Tools for a while, you'll probably know Mark and Mike started the company with the sole intent to make the individual manager more effective with managerial guidance, actionable behaviors, and tools. And while that's still our focus, we know we can help more managers when we work with larger groups within organizations. We've made our client on-site training very affordable and will work with 25 to 30 people. Contact Maggie at manager-tools.com to learn more about our 3 standard training days: Effective Manager, Effective Communicator, and Effective Hiring Manager. Or check it out at manager-tools.com.
So the first one is introduce yourself. So if you go into a meeting, unfortunately, everybody has meetings all day. And so when you listen to this, within the next hour, you will be able to try this out. Look at what people do who you would class as people, the friendly ones, the outgoing ones, the people who always want to chat. And we'll bet they walk into the room and they greet everybody. And if they don't know one of the people, they introduce themselves. And if you're not a people person, that might sound a bit weird, right? Because maybe your next call or your next meeting is with people in your team and you've been talking to them on and off all day. Or maybe you saw them yesterday. But you can still say something in way of a greeting, like, oh, hey, Paul, good to see you again. And it's kind of funny if you've just walked across the office together or within a few minutes of each other, or you've just been on a call with someone, or you say, if sometimes when I'm on a call with Maggie, I'm like, oh, fancy seeing you here again. So, it's silly, but it's a greeting. It's an acknowledgement that she's there and I'm there, and isn't it weird that we're here again? You might say, oh, good morning, Mary. Even if you see Mary every day, and if this is the first time you've seen her today, and if you have the show notes, so if you buy a personal license on the Manager Tools website, you get the show notes for all of the shows, and that's basically what we are using as our guide here, so you get all of this. And if you could see the show notes, you would see we put an exclamation mark at the end of each of those. So, good morning, Mary, exclamation mark. And that's because we want you to sound excited. We want you to sound genuinely pleased to see that person, even if you just saw them 5 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago. Think about, one of the things I thought about when I was writing this was when parents go to pick up their kids from school and they're like, oh, it's really good to see little Johnny. And You saw them 5 hours ago when you dropped them off at school. Like, how can you be that excited? But that's because I don't have kids, and I am equally excited to see my cat. So if you struggle with like feeling excited about someone you saw earlier today, think about that. You might be able to transfer that feeling.
Essentially, the exclamation mark is a way for us to say, have a positive tone to your voice. There's a big difference between, oh, good morning, and yep, morning.
Yeah.
The first one sounds like a person who's excited to see the other person in the room. And the second one sounds like someone who had his last meeting was bad, right? Even though maybe our last meeting was bad, or we don't really want to be in this meeting, we want to still portray positivity because that's part of what people do in front of others, right? They're excited to see other people. So we greet people and say hello. And if you don't know someone in the room or on the call, we're going to introduce ourselves to them. And we actually have, of course, a podcast about how to introduce yourself. It's 2 parts. And the short version is you shake hands, you say your whole name clearly, and you explain where you fit into the group or the team or the organization and ask for their name. So it kind of sounds like this, right? Good morning, Kate Horseman. I'm in Robert Brown's development team, and I'm here to make sure we don't get too wild. If they don't respond with their name, you can say, oh, I'm so sorry. Can you remind me of your name? Or I'm so sorry, I didn't catch your name. And then you'll know.
Yeah, it is easy. And what's more, once you know, you'll be able to use their name in the meeting, which is something else that people do. They use people's names much more often than other people do. And using someone's name makes them feel important, whether they're people or not. Everybody likes to hear their own name. Dale Carnegie said, a person's name is to that person the sweetest, most important sound in any language. So it's important to find out what people's names are so that you can use them.
And we're going to introduce ourselves to others, and we're going to greet people. The next portion of that is that we're also going to introduce other people. This is another thing that people do. They introduce people who don't know each other to each other. People want their friends to know each other because they love humans, right? This is why they go to the meetings, because there's people there. And this is kind of a more the merrier mentality. They're excited that their friends are there and they want their friends to be friends. There's a cast, of course, for introducing people as well. And the short version of that is that you start with the more senior person and you say their name. And then you say, I'd like to introduce you to, and then you give them the first and last name of the more junior person. You then say the name of the junior person again, followed by the first and last names of the senior person. Because, of course, you guys know sometimes it's hard to remember someone's name when you first meet them. So we're going to repeat it. And I've made it sound really complicated and difficult, but it's not. So we would say, okay, let's pretend we're introducing Jill Jr. and Sam Sr. And we simply say, Sam, I'd like to introduce you to Jill Jr. Jill, Sam Sr. It sounded really hard.
It did. It sounded way harder than that. It's way harder to explain than it is to actually do. And if you don't know a person's seniority relative to the other people, then use the person you think is older as the more senior person. And if they look about the same age, just pick one. You can't do this wrong. Etiquette says that you introduce the more junior person to the more senior one. So you start with the senior one. But if you don't know who that is, or you do it backwards, it doesn't really matter. There are some other nuances to this about who you introduce and how you introduce them. So I recommend you listen to the whole cast. And if you go onto the website and you type in I'm not a people person into the search, it'll bring up this podcast's page. And then all of the other casts that we're mentioning will be on that page so you can go listen to them.
When we're thinking about this, honestly, I know it sounds complicated, like more senior, more junior. Most people aren't, I don't even think, aware of the whole etiquette piece to it. So you can listen to the cast and give yourself a little bit of grace. It's not going to come out perfectly every time. So, it's not going to be like, oh, they didn't do it correctly. For most people, they don't know the correct way to do it. And If you haven't listened to the cast yet, it's okay. You could just give it a shot. Most of the people enjoy being introduced so much and hearing their name so much that just the fact that it's being done is a positive thing.
Okay, so next up we have use a salutation. And if you look at emails from people you consider to be people persons, people, you will notice that they use your name. And sometimes it's your name, sometimes it's a nickname, sometimes it's a general nickname like dude or mate, but there is always a salutation. And there's always a valediction. That's the end part. So if you were writing to a friend and you said, love Mary, that's the valediction. And we know, just like you do, that emails always go to the person you address them to, and you write that person's name in the address when you're addressing the email. And also, they know who it came from, because that's in the header of the email too. So technically, there's no need for a salutation or a valediction. But if you don't include someone's name in your emails, people think you're rude. And the only way I know this is people have said it to me, and I didn't know that. I was like, you know who it came from. It came from me. And just the act of adding their name and my name to an email changed people's perception of me, which is still surprising to me. But it's so easy to do. And people think of you differently. They think of you as more personable, more interested in them, more collaborative, and kinder. And it's not to say that you're not any of those things, but it's likely people don't think of you that way if you don't do this. So it's a super easy thing to change. Just write their name and then your name in the email.
Exactly.
I actually have best regards in my saved signature. So mine, if I type /S, Text expands it for me, and it says best regards, Wendy, because I wouldn't naturally write best regards. And so I just have it in the signature, and then I don't have to think about it. It just puts it in there for me.
I think maybe iPhones can do this too, or like phones and stuff. They can do it too. A lot of Apple iOS stuff does it. But Text Expander has changed the way my emails come out, because now mine is best Kate. And so I hit /S and it types in best Kate, because it's more efficient than typing all those letters. And it's gentler version of an email. The highly truncated email that just says, I need X by 3:00, or just the one that just has the data, to the other person, it feels as if they weren't considered. It feels like that email could have gone to anybody.
And it could have come from anyone too.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're in Europe and have been waiting for a chance to attend a Manager Tools conference, here it is. We'll be in London, near Heathrow Airport, on February 5th and 6th with our Effective Manager and Effective Communicator conferences. This event sold out last year, so don't hesitate. Guarantee yourself a seat today by registering for the event at manager-tools.com/training. I hope to see you there.
Next on our list is using and not but. And again, we have a whole podcast about this. But using and when you would normally use but makes you seem more personable, more collaborative, and easier to work with. And again, it's a fairly easy thing to change. Most of the time, we don't actually listen to the words we use, which is why when you hear yourself recorded, you think, who is that person? Partly because you don't recognize the sound of your own voice, because it's different when it's outside of you than when it's in your head, but also because you hear all these verbal tics that you have, like saying and that you don't know that you do. Repetitive words like. I do that too. You don't hear them until you hear yourself recorded. So it's a little bit harder to stop saying but and say and, because you often don't hear yourself saying but it is relatively easy to change if you pay attention to what you're saying. And again, it makes such a big difference to the way people think of you.
And I think, too, it goes to the purpose of the word, right? But indicates a shift and is a continuation. And I always kind of think of it that way. When you say but, it's like, oh, we're going to veer off here. If you say and, you're keeping things on the same track. And so
that's a really good analogy.
It's weird. I think I got it from 8th grade poetry. So shout out to the Fredericksburg Middle School system. We have some examples here because of course, we're alluding to another cast that we have, right? So in the cast about and not but, we have a ton of examples. We're going to give you some here as well, just so you can hear the difference. Once you've heard the difference, you get, I think, very much more focused on your use of the words. So that if you were to say, I think the spreadsheet is important, but I don't think it should be public, you could instead say, I think the spreadsheet is important and I don't think it should be in public.
Yeah. The but is automatically combative, automatically says, there's something I disagree with you. It's almost like when you say but, the bit you said before stops mattering. So even if you say, I think the spreadsheet's important, but I don't think it should be public, you're agreeing that the spreadsheet is important. But what happens is people only hear what you said after the but. Whereas if you say, I think the spreadsheet's important and I don't think it should be public, the person still hears the agreement. The agreement part stays, and so it's a whole different tone for the second part.
Yeah, we've got some other examples. You could say the parcel got delivered, but it was ruined. Or you could say the parcel got delivered and it was ruined. So again, we're focusing more on the positive thing. Jeremy's idea is a good one, but it won't work for grandfathered customers. As opposed to Jeremy's idea is a good one and it won't work for grandfathered customers. Again, there's the lack of combativeness with the and.
It sounds like, as well, Jeremy's idea is a good one and we can use it for all of these people, but it won't work for these people, so we have to think of another plan. As opposed to, if you say Jeremy's idea is a good one, but it almost sounds like it's useless.
Yeah. It sounds like you're saying his idea is not a good one.
Yes, exactly. They like the underlying thing. So, and not but is an amazingly simple change that makes a really big difference to the way that people see you.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorites, honestly. I've almost gone too far with it. Because I think when I present at a conference, if we're at a public conference, I think I have eliminated it from the entire presentation, which it's easier to do when you're presenting. In my real life, maybe I need to balance those a little bit.
So, but is a useful word.
It is.
It does exist for a reason.
We're not trying to completely eliminate its existence. We're taking out a hit on the word but. So another thing I really need to temper is this last one. I need to do this much more. We recommend that you try to stop interrupting.
And both of us are as bad as each other. I'm terrible at it too, and I'm really trying not to do it. So there are two kinds of people who interrupt. There's the people who interrupt you to correct you or to rebut you. And they don't want to listen to whatever it is you're saying because they already know it's wrong and they want to tell you what's right. They don't want to waste their time listening when you're wrong and I know the answer. I'm just going to tell you and you can just stop. And these people need to stop interrupting because they give the impression of being condescending and contemptuous and egotistical. So like, I know everything and you know nothing. And again, it's not necessarily true that you are condescending or contemptuous or egotistical. It's the behavior of interrupting makes people draw the conclusion that you are those things. So if you stop doing it, people will stop thinking of you in that way.
It just changes the perception a little bit. Then there's also the people who interrupt out of excitement. They like your idea and, oh my gosh, they've had an even better one. Those people need to stop interrupting as well. That behavior actually gives the impression of being self-centered, right? Self-important. It's a little self-indulgent to not be willing to listen to the end of the other person's conversation before starting your own new conversation. And it's just something to keep in mind that interrupting for both reasons is saying what I have to say is more important than what you have to say.
None of the words we've just used, like condescending and self-important and self-centered, are used to describe people. Bill Clinton is a people person. He's one of the examples that people always give of somebody who is a people person who wants to have people around, who is really interested in other people. And what people say is talking to him makes you feel like you're the only person in the room. It's not about him. It's not about him being self-centered and wanting you to talk to him. He is absorbed in the person he's talking to. And actually, I looked at a couple of YouTube videos of him when I was writing this, and you can see it. It's a real focus on the person who's talking and a real desire to hear what they're saying. So that's what you want to emulate. Let people finish.
Let them feel like they're important, right? People don't talk for no reason. Part of the reason that people are speaking is because they want to be heard. They believe what they have to say is important, and consider that interrupting doesn't respect their feeling of that. If you're a person that interrupts, you might consider, and we would recommend that you teach yourself to stop. You'll need to pay attention to your own behavior, and that's because it's hard sometimes to realize what we're doing, and sometimes it's hard to realize how often you're doing things or how often you use a certain behavior. But when you want to interrupt, just wait for the other person to stop talking and then take a breath before you speak. It's funny, I actually do this by putting my left hand over my mouth when someone else is talking, because I have to physically stop myself from interrupting sometimes. And I've trained myself to do this. It doesn't always work. Sometimes I'm not paying enough attention. And for me, it's a physical reminder. Hey, just let them finish. This technique, the waiting until they're done and then taking a big breath, will also really help you use and not but, because you can think more carefully about what you're going to say and be more careful in general about the words that you're going to use.
Often when I've interrupted is when I say something that I regret later, not in the sense of I regret saying whatever it was I said, but the way I said it. If I'm going too fast, I'm much more likely to say something in a way that's not helpful to the conversation or the relationship. So slowing down really helps with that.
I think too, often when people interrupt, it's to contradict. So if you're going to contradict, you could do it in a more gentle way by using the and technique. And if you do it that way, you might get more consensus.
That's true. There's nothing on this list that we've just gone through that's difficult in and of itself, right? It's not difficult to add someone's name to an email. It's not difficult to introduce yourself. It's not difficult to use and instead of but. But behavior change in general is hard. We all know that because we've all tried to change our behaviors sometimes. And if you're not getting the results that you want, or you've been told that you need to be more friendly or easier to talk to or more collaborative or more of a people person, then these small steps will set you on the road to being one of those people. And it's amazing how if you change your behavior, you actually start to be one of those people. We said at the beginning, we're not going to try and change who you are, but actually changing your behavior does change who you are in a weird way. So just take these little steps and see what happens. We'll guarantee you'll get some better outcomes.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Lindy.
That's all for this week. We'll be back next week with more guidance.